Right, okay, so tonight's Parsha Shir, Parsha Shlach Lecha, three interesting offerings. Of course, the Parsha begins, the main part of the Parsha is the Meraglim, which we're revisiting this year. And I want to share with you just some ideas about that, and then we'll move on to other parts of the Parsha. The Pasuk says that Klal Yisrael were punished. They were meant to go, as we said in last week's Parsha, they were meant to go straight into Eretz Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made them run quickly. He was keen for them to get into Eretz Yisrael. But they wanted to tour out the land to see the nature of Eretz Yisrael. And it became a disaster, tragedy kicked in, and as we know, the report back of the Meraglim was not positive, and as a result, they spent 40 years in the Midbar. The Pasuk says, the first line in the first box on the handout, if you're listening online, please do email me, j.golker@gmail.com. The Pasuk says, "B'mispar hayomim asher tartem es haaretz aboim yom." For the number of days that you went around touring the land for 40 days, yom l'shana, for a day for each of the year, tisu es avonosechem aboim shana. You will carry your sin for 40 years. That's where it comes from. Now, the first question, which is an obvious question, the wording seems very difficult. Yom l'shana, yom l'shana. A day for a year, a day for a year. It's the other way around. It's a shana l'yom. For every day that they were walking around touring, the penalty was 1 year that they have to stay in the midbar. So the wording seems wrong. Yom l'shana, yom l'shana. And another problem is that later in the parsha we're told that the 40 days was for a totally different reason. It had nothing to do with the fact that they were running around the touring and seeing and spying out the land for 40 days. Rashi tells us it was for a totally different reason. The Pasuk says, your children are going to wander in the desert for 40 years. A terrible thing. And they will carry your treason until all the bodies, the corpses, have fallen in the midbar. So 40 years, and now why 40 years? So Rashi tells us, that no one died less than 60 years old. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu decreed 40 years, because the youngest, who are 20, is always the age of culpability in Shemayim, and therefore, for those who were of the age of 20, you've got to wait 40 years until they reach the age of 60. So the question is, which is the real reason? Is it 40 years because 40 days they were traveling around? Is it because of those 40 days? Or is it because we wanted to make sure that the youngest who were culpable in Shemayim are going to reach 60? What's 60, by the way? If you look at the next Gemara, it's a famous Gemara in Moed Kotz and Koris. Omer Rabba, mechamishim v'atshishim mishana. A person, Rachman Islam, dies in his 6th decade, between the ages of 50 and 60. Zui misas Koris, says the Gemara. And the Gemara carries on. Rabbi Yosef, he would make a simcha, a party, a celebration. Omar, he said, nafkili mikaris. Many people do this. On their 60th birthday, they make some form of Sudas Haidah, that they've now emerged from the danger zone. They've now, age 60, they're nofak mikaris. They've left the realm, the area of karis. So two questions. Question number one, what does the pasuk mean? Yom l'shana, yom l'shana. Surely it should be the other way around. Shana l'yom, shana l'yom. And second of all, the reason is given that those who were the age of 20 would hit the age of 60, and therefore your max is 40 years. So that's the reason. Nothing to do with the 40 days. So there's an interesting maharal.
Rashi says it on the pasuk before the Torah says.
Rashi says this. This is exactly. Very much so. Yes. This is in Pasuk Lamed Gimel, and the Yom L'Shana is the next Pasuk. So it's even more confusing. Exactly. Rashi says, and this is basically a Maharal. The Maharal explains the Rashi on, this is in the previous parak. The Pasuk says, V'yoshvu mitur haaretz miketz aboim yom. After 40 days, they came back, they finished touring the land. Says the Gemara, says Rashi, why 40 days? Parsa. Eretz Yisrael is 400 parsa by 400 parsa. each parsec is approximately between 2 and 3 miles. So that means we're talking about an area of 800, at least 800 or 1,000 square miles, whatever it may be. Yeah, Eretz Yisrael, we know what Eretz Yisrael is. A person walks 10 parsos a day. So therefore, it's going to take you 40 days just to go from one end to the other. Forget the bit, how are you going to see the whole land? Says Rashi, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that there's going to be a whole year in the Midbar for every day they're traveling. And therefore, he did Kvitz HaDerech, he was Makatz HaDerech, he abbreviated, he shortened the actual travel time. So it's not shaykh to see the whole of Eretz Yisrael in 40 days. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Makatz HaDerech, so they could see whatever they needed to see in 40 days. And therefore, the punishment would not be more than 40 years. Now, the Maharal says, he explains this, and this is going to answer our questions. Af al gav, says the Maharal in Gurari, even though, of course, the 40 years was the punishment for the 40 days that they tore the land, Yom Lashana, as we said, nonetheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu shortened the way for them, like we said above, this is the Rashi I just read. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing a chesed that he wants to abbreviate, to shorten the journey, then make it 3 days, make it 5 days. Why 40 days? No, because if you're going to go less than 40, those who were 20 wouldn't arrive yet at the age of 60, which is our critical age. So now we can put the two ideas together. Says the Maharal, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does chesed in the punishment. The punishment is, it's got to be, for every day that you traveled around, you're going to get a year. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that they could spend years traveling Eretz Yisrael, hundreds of days, and therefore it's going to be a very long punishment. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu was makatzer it to 40 days. Why 40? If you're going to, in for a penny, in for a pound, make it 10 days, make it 3 days, make it 2 days. Teretz is, because the shortest possible time is 40 days, because there are those who age 20, they need to, we want to punish them before they hit the age of 60, when they can't go beyond that, as we said above, because of Kores. So therefore, that explains the two questions. And that explains why Yom L'Shana. Yeah, which reason is it? It's combining the two reasons. So Yom L'Shana, we now understand, because really Be'emes HaKadosh, the Yom L'Shana is the reason. Because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu was doing the Chesed, because there was going to be a whole year for one day, so therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Mekatzer. The Shail is, why wasn't he Mekatzer more? Teretz is, like Rashi says, because of the 20 to 60. Fine. But what you see, an interesting thing, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the punishment, is thinking about chesed, how to minimize it for Klal Yisrael. That's an astonishing thing, and that is a very hard thing for anyone to do. The message, of course, is that we have to imitate HaKadosh Baruch Hu and not lash out when we're angry, and show some sort of compassion. The secret, we're not on the level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to think of the chesed and the compassion within the punishment. But the thing we can learn is just not to lash out. And that also comes out from this week's parasha. When Kolev, the pasuk says, "Vayahas Kolev esom el Moshe," he silenced the people. Vayomer olei na'alei v'yirashnu, we can go up and we'll inherit it. So Rashi, the famous Rashi, Vayahas Kolev, what does that mean? Hishtik es kulam, he silenced them all. Nothing of shtika, of being silent. El Moshe, says the pasuk, says Rashi, Lishmoya mashida b'Moshe, Tzoveach v'omar v'chizu bilvados elonu ben Amram. Is this all he's done for us? So they thought he's going to speak disparagingly against Moshe Rabbeinu. Oh, very good. We're going to hear some more Lashon Hara about Moshe Rabbeinu. This is a rabble now. They had their complaints against Moshe Rabbeinu because of the Meraglim. They all went silent to listen to the Gnus. Omar, so then Kolev said, he split the sea for us, he gave us the mon, if he gives us a slav, he causes the slav to fly. And he says, make ladders to go to Shemaim, we'll get there. So Kalev was very clever because he silenced the people. The key is not to just lash out, to think, let me think about it, not to respond, sort of kick straight away. Okay, how does the strategy help? When they figure out that it was a hoax, the Peleyoet says, beautiful Lashon, Hashtika be'es hakas is kamayim leish. What a beautiful expression. Silence at the time of anger is like water on a fire. Okay, good. Atkan. Now let's press on. Later in the parsha, we have the mitzvah of challah. This week's parsha. It says the pasuk, top of the next page, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe lemer daber b'nei Yisrael v'omartu aleim b'voichem el haaretz asher ani mevi eschem shama. When you come into the land, and then you're going to be mafresh challah. The Drash Moshe, the great Moshe Feinstein, in his Pirush on Chumash, he basically asked three questions. Three very interesting questions. Let's take a look inside. Hine, tzorich lahavin in challah. We've got to understand this whole idea of challah. Sheshayich yosel l'noshim kiyodua, which of course is one of the three mitzvahs which are primarily focused on women. He quotes a Medrash Tanchuma, I've got it at the bottom there, that the Medrash says, Kashem sho'ishim mikashkeshes isos b'mayim, that when she's kneading the dough with water, v'achar kach hi magbas chalos, and then she's mafresh challah, kach os HaKadosh Baruch Hu le'odam harishon, so to HaKadosh Baruch Hu did when he sort of made the earth of the ground, he added water, and he fashioned Adam harishon. So you see there's a parallel between a woman giving birth and Hashem creating life. That's the parallel, that's what Ramesh is referring to. V'gam bikrod Yechezkel, so too in the pasuk in Yechezkel, nosen bracha miyuchad lechallah. There's a special bracha for challah. For reishis arisosechem titnu lakoyen lo niach bracha beisecha. Beautiful bracha. V'gam b'perek hey b'avos in Mishnah Ches choshiv chas v'shalom klol yosef gedolah shlolit lesachallah. The Rav shall clear but chas v'shalom that a famine will come if a person doesn't take challah. Question is, ma'ishna challah mishat trumas u'maisros. Why? What's special about challah that it gets this big bracha? So that's the first question. The second question, a very interesting question. When is challah? When you chayv in challah? As soon as you come into Eretz Yisrael. That's what the pasuk says. B'voichem el haaretz. Trumas and maestros is only chiyuv, only becomes obligatory after the kibush and chiluk, after 14 years. What's the difference? You're harvesting your wheat and your barley. You're getting flour. You're creating dough. Then you've got a chiyuv of challah, but the actual hafrashas, trumas and maestros from your crop, that only happens later. And what exactly is the connection between challah and women? Those are the three questions. So let's just continue with Moshe. V'lochein tzorich lomar diyesh chiluk bein trumas and maestros lechallah. There's a difference between trumas and maestros and challah. She trumas and maestros nisremes me'achnosa. From the trumas and maestros, you only have to be mafrished from that which you bring into your house, the finished product. V'challah me'hoitzah, but challah you have to separate from the very outset. V'hu lelamed lebnei Adam. Says Ramesh, this is the beginning of the answer. Shetzorich litein bein minachnosa bein me'atzah. V'yesh protzim sha'atzah adifa she'me'achnosa yesh ish choshev. Because when it comes to the hachnosa, when you bring the crop into your house, yesh ish choshev shemi yafsid. I'm not going to start giving too much because I don't know what I'm going to bring in. So why should I start giving? Ve'ena noisen takif. He's not going to give straight away. I'll wait till the end of the week. Let's see what this week brings in. It's not a bad trait. It's pretty good. But it's not quite as good as giving straight away. You know what? I'll wait to see what this month brings in. At the end of the month, I'll see how much I've earned, and I'll give my meiser accordingly. There are some people who wait, let's see what my life brings in. I'll wait until the very end. Sometimes he cuts it too fine, and death catches up and gets in there first. And he hasn't given any stock in his life. His sin is too great to bear. But when you separate at the outset, whether he profits or doesn't profit, he's got to give. What does that mean? What's Ramosha saying? It says Ramosha, the difference between challah and trumas maestros is this. Challah is given at the beginning of the process. Think about it. You add the flour and the water together, you make your dough, and you've got to be mafresh there and then. You don't know how your dough is going to turn out. Maybe the baking will flop. It happens to the best of us. And maybe the challah will burn, and maybe, 1,000 maybes. But that's irrelevant. Challah shows tremendous emunah, tremendous betochen. I'm doing this at the outset, regardless of the outcome of how this is going to turn out. Trumas and maestros, I'm only giving on the end result. Maybe maybe there won't be a big result. Maybe there'll be a bad crop this year. Who knows? So you give on the end result. Challah is much better in that you're giving at the very beginning of the process, regardless of the outcome. And really, what we're doing, what challah therefore represents, is an offering of our appreciation, even for just having the raw materials, for the privilege of making the dough, and then hoping that I'm going to bake this and having the raw materials, and even though I don't know the end result. And therefore, says Ramosha, that is merumas in the halachas, because challah becomes obligatory as soon as you enter the land, from the beginning of the process. That's why you have to be mafresh challah on entry to Eretz Yisrael. Mash'enkein, trumas and maestros is always at the end of the process. So once you've conquered, you divided the land, now we can start focusing on trumas and maestros. And that really is the special connection between challah and women, like we said, because the medrash is equating the making of the bread with HaKadosh Baruch Hu creating life. And that's really the kerch of the woman, to have that bitochen, to begin the process and to give with this knowledge that I'm doing this regardless of the outcome. And that's why challah receives the special bracha. That's Moshe Feinstein's explanation of challah. Very beautiful explanation. Okay, let's finish off with one final idea. The parsha ends with the famous case of the makoshesh. What's the makoshesh? So it says the medrash. The makoshesh, of course, is his gathering and his being mechalal Shabbos. And that is the very final part of the parsha is Parsha Tzitzis, and just before Parsha Tzitzis you have the Makoshesh, he's gathering in and he's being Mechal Shabbos. What says the Medrash is the connection between the Makoshesh and the Parsha of Tzitzis straight afterwards. So, it says the Medrash, and there are this comes in different places, but Loma Nismach Parshas Makoshesh LeParsha Tzitzis. Shebeshah Shem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Makoshesh Chayv Misa, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, the Makoshesh has been violated Shabbos, is Chayv Misa. Omer Moshe Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Rebbeinu Shloilom, Ein Lo Pesha B'Dover Zeh, Shema Hoya B'Daita Shlo Yishkach Es HaShabbos, V'Lishmar HaMitzvahs Shlo Yom HaShabbos V'Eino Lo Yisei Tefillin Olav. You know why this guy is messed up? Because it's Shabbos today, and he's not wearing tefillin. And because it's Shabbos and he's not wearing tefillin, he hasn't got that reminder of tefillin, and therefore the guy has slipped up. Maybe because it's Shabbos today. Maybe he forgot it was Shabbos. No. We warned him it was Shabbos. And therefore this fellow, this Makoshesh, is Chayv Skila. That which you try to argue is not his fault, he wasn't wearing tefillin. I will command my children that when it comes to Shabbos, although they're potter from tefillin, they still have to wear tzitzis on Shabbos. For Oz, yehi mazkir mitzvahs Shabbos, and then he'll remember Shabbos. Beautiful. So therefore, says the Medrash, that's the juxtaposition between the Makoshesh and tzitzis. That because Moshe Rabbeinu tried to defend him by saying, listen, he wasn't wearing tefillin, he forgot it was Shabbos, he didn't have that ice, that's why he slipped up. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'll give him an ice, he'll wear the tzitzis on Shabbos, and that will hopefully prevent him from being mechala. The question is, obvious question really, he wasn't wearing tefillin. What sort of defense is that? Moshe Rabbeinu argued that he wasn't wearing tefillin. Tefillin we know is an ice, a covenant between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that reminds us that we have a connection between us and Hashem. And he wasn't wearing the tefillin, therefore he forgot, and maybe he slipped up. But Shabbos is a nice.
Which is why you don't need
Right. The reason exactly because there are 3 oisers, there's bris, there's Shabbos, there's tefillin. You only need 2. So on Shabbos you don't need tefillin. So he had his ois. So what sort of defense is that of Moshe Rabbeinu? It says, I saw this in the Eitz Chaim, in the Shem of the Mayonos HaNetzach, and he's quoting the Sfas Emes. It's very hard to find things in the Sfas Emes. I take his word for it, but I did have a quick look in the Sfas Emes, I couldn't find it. But this is, he's giving an answer from the Sfas Emes. Let's look at the penultimate paragraph. Moshe Rabbeinu Ta'an, Moshe Rabbeinu argued, like we said, to defend the Makoshesh. Had it been the weekday, he wouldn't have sinned. Because the mitzvah of tefillin is saving him. V'rak b'Shabbos shayapotim tefillin kilkel v'choto. Dafka on Shabbos, where he's not wearing tefillin, he messed up. Lokach somach la'Kadosh Baruch Hu mitzvah sisis neges gam b'Shabbos. Therefore, Kadosh Baruch Hu said that sisis is going to work on Shabbos as well. U'lechayre kasha. Ma bein Shabbos to tefillin. What's the difference? Hari shneim be'echod mishamshim b'tur ois. Both of them are considered an ois, a sign, a covenant between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. V'kama odif koach tefillin mikoach Shabbos. Why should tefillin be better than Shabbos? Why is it more preventative? Mikan hachiach hasfas emes. Shekol mitzvah hatluya ba'asiyah gashmis b'poel. Any mitzvah, you know the difference between tefillin and Shabbos? Tefillin is proactive. You're taking tefillin, you're wrapping it around your arm and your head, and you're actively doing something. That is more powerful, more potent to arouse a person, to stimulate a person, more than just something which is in your mind. I feel a bit without doing anything. Shabbos is passive. The Chinuch, and the quotes the Chinuch, Bedin Shviras Etzim Mikabim Pesach, famous Chinuch. The Chinuch says you're not allowed to break the bones. Why? Because that's an animalistic way of eating. It's an unrefined way of eating. We have to behave like Bnei Melachim. Famous Chinuch. That we are conditioned according to the way we act. So we act, dress down Friday, people behave a little bit bad, more relaxed and chilled as well. You dress smart, you act smart. So therefore, says the Sfas Emes, since we're conditioned by our actions, that famous chinuch, the tefillin would be more potent to prevent us from doing the Aveira than Shabbos. And that was Moshe Rabbeinu's defense. Okay, so there we have 3 ideas on this week's parsha. The 2 questions in the Meraglim, shouldn't it say Shana L'Yom, why Yom L'Shana? And moreover, 40 days is given for a different reason. The Teretz says the Maharal, no, that what you're seeing over here is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to be Mekatze. He wanted to abbreviate our travel time, but he did it as much as he possibly could. We couldn't go less than 40. Why? Because of the other reason. The reason being that those of the age of 20 would reach the age of 60, so they couldn't go less than 40 years. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what you see from this, is not to lash out when we're angry. To just take a step back, take a deep breath, a bit of silence. And that was the strategy of Kolev. Vayahas Kolev esa'om, he silenced them, he just calmed it down, like the Pele Yoetz says, Hashtika be'es hakas, kemayim lo'esh. Then we had the 3 kashas of Chala. Why is Chala obligated on entry to Eretz Yisrael, and Truma Maisa only after conquering it? What is the special connection between Chala and women? And why does Chala receive that special bracha? So Moshe explains that because Chala is the beginning of the process, Mashenkin and Trumas and Maisros is the culmination of the process. And that explains all our various questions. And the final question about the Makoshesh, Moshe Rabbeinu's defense seems illogical. You've already got the ois. There's a difference between an active ois and a passive ois. Tefillin is active kodesh. Active ois is more preventative, more potent to prevent the Makoshesh from perhaps doing his Aveira. Okay, we'll leave it there. Golker.